The priority for LGBT should not be same-sex marriage because it short-circuits the creation of a sexual revolution. It is my belief that a focus on creating erotic relationships in society is a better approach than assimilation. We should not prioritize a civil rights agenda over creating social change with our bodily connections with others. I advocate instead creating social change through dialogue about our sexualities, coming to terms with that part of us that politics has deemed private and irrelevant, creating authentic connections with others where we respect their desires and pursuits of pleasures as they respect ours. Debate cannot be separated from our bodies. We as queer people can never step outside of our bodies as desiring and sexual. The very thing that keeps us in shackles is society's fear of talking about our sexuality. This shame made me hate myself and can be seen as the reason why a lot of queer youth are bullied and commit suicide. When I was alone in my room at night, I would find naked men on the internet or think of some guys from school and I would get aroused. This was supposed to be abnormal. I tried fantasizing about girls, but the fantasies never got beyond dancing. Suddenly, my mind would be on Ashton Kutcher's body. After my climax, tears would stream down my face, for I realized what I soon had to clean up was dirty and shameful. I was an abomination, and I couldn't control it. But this pleasure I experienced alone in my bedroom is what made me different to the point of bullying and exclusion. Shaming of queer sexualities is because of heterosexism, which Marvin Ellison defines as the structural dynamic of anti-LGBT oppression, which grants moral value to heterosexuality alone and presumes that everyone should be heterosexual. Heterosexism reinforces sexism by applying pressure, including violence when necessary, to ensure that people play their proper dominant subordinate gender roles. People are subject not only to threats of heterosexist violence, but also feel pain, fear, and shame if they experience homoerotic desire. Discussions of our sexuality and erotic relationships must be the starting point for LGBT activism, especially because people think it's too dirty for politics. David Bell explains that gay marriage desexualizes political activism. We have forgotten that being gay is a politicized sexual identity. This creates a dichotomy between the good queer and the bad queer, privileging the queer who doesn't talk about her sexuality, which condemns us from ever engaging in radical erotic politics, sustaining oppression. We can talk about justice so long as our genitalia never gets involved. An example of how this plays out in real life was when I organized Day of Silence at my high school and several people who signed on board said, "I support your movement for equality and for marriage, but I don't want your gayness to be all in my face." We hear this all the time, that despite the fact that it's really heterosexuality in our face all the time, it's the same as Christian rhetoric that says, we don't hate the sinner, we just hate the sin, without realizing that our identity is what they have defined as a sin. Same-sex marriage is also a strategy of inclusion through exclusion. Bell says that in the process of granting our community rights, we exclude others who don't want to participate in monogamous long-term relationships, maintaining oppression of those who differ from society because of their sexualities. This is ethically bankrupt. Ellison explains that eroticizing equality lies at the heart of challenging every social oppression. No ethic can claim moral credibility if it is constructed on suffering and body alienation. A liberating ethic must break from sex negativity. As sensuous beings, we know and value the world and become moral agents only as we feel connected in and through our bodies. Through an erotic ethic, we can create a type of politics that would solve the rights-based problems my opponent cites. The reason why things aren't extended now is because society refuses to affirm the pleasures of queer bodies. An erotic social revolution will create the impetus for universal access to things like immigration, healthcare, etc. My opponent's first argument that we're about to achieve same-sex marriage is counterproductive to a sexual revolution. Just because our efforts are close to being realized doesn't mean that those efforts are good. In fact, my opponent's rhetoric of same-sex marriage prioritized over radical initiatives perpetuates belief systems that teach that other, more transformative modes of change are impossible, unnecessary, or both. This is an eclipse of hope of achieving authentic liberation. Additionally, legalizing same-sex marriage would not have as profound of an effect as my opponent says it would. Homophobic people in Alabama aren't suddenly going to say, well, the gays can get married now. I guess they really are just like us. Politics doesn't preach values to an individual, but rather individuals uphold certain values such as heterosexism that are reflected in politics. Focusing on disrupting the gender binary and contempt for that outside heterosexuality would be a better mechanism for LGBT rights and even eventually marriage. The transgendered argument makes little sense. Even if some transgender people would like to get same-sex marriage beforehand, it is much more productive for them to move towards the elimination of the gender binary that enforces gender identity to be in properly sexed bodies. The benefits of same-sex marriage for the transgender community is minimal at best, and advocating that it's in their interest is a way of sidestepping more pressing issues for their daily existence in favor of what the good homosexual wants. In conclusion, it's a better idea for us to engage each other and bring our sexualities to the forefront of our political discussions. Same-sex marriage is a privatizing strategy of assimilation that sets us back. So I ask you today to join me in the sexual revolution. Let us fight heterosexism together, for we all desire and achieve pleasure in different and beautiful ways. An army of lovers can never lose.